you so much for, thank you so much for coming to this last edition of the Brown Bag for this academic session. My name is Samuel Uju Olorutoba, and I'm here at the Institute of African Studies. I'm the coordinator of the Brown Bag series. The Institute of African Studies happy always to have you join our program. And we are happy today to have our sister our friend, Dr. Ruth Murambadoro, who will be speaking to us on her ongoing research. So I will just read her bio, and then she will start. She will have like 30 minutes to talk, and then we will engage her in discussions from this presentation. Thanks again for coming. So Dr. Ruth Murambadoro is an African feminist who writes on women, transitional justice, social justice, and politics of the Global South, based at the Center for Feminist Research, York University. Her work explored the gender nature of the post-colonial state to broaden understanding of violence perpetrated against women in sub-Saharan Africa, with a focus on Zimbabwe. She holds research affiliation with the Harriet Tubman Institute and the Witt School of Governance. In her long-term project, Humanizing African Women Movement, she is working with emerging and seasoned African artists to build a digital repository of research creation representing African women's resistance in the post-colony. So Dr. Ruth, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Samuel, and I'm happy to be here. Just allow me to pick my presentation. Am I visible on that end?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you so much, and welcome to everyone who's joining us today. I really want to share with you some of the inspirations that have gotten me to try a new way of doing research, which I'm learning about as I am going. And I believe it's part of my interest in exploring, the decolonial research methods, and also, taking a critical feminist lens in the work that I'm doing. So that, I think, is part of what I would be talking about today with the title Research Creations as Medium for Truth-Telling and Transformative Peace Building. I will start off by giving a bit of a background. Sorry, there's something. I'll start off by giving a bit of a background to situate the work that I'm doing. I'm a Zimbabwean scholar and a Zimbabwean national who also happens to be a woman, and have previously done work that looked at peace building processes in Zimbabwe, a country that has a long history of unresolved conflict dating back to its cleavages with colonialism and other forms of marginalizations that have happened to people within the country, which in its way has left many of the wounds that have occurred unaddressed. And it is in this setting where I will speak a bit more about Zimbabwe in a short while, but I'm just trying to give a background to, you know, what has gotten me to think of my work, you know, within this research framework that I'm using, that adopts research creation as an approach to engage realities of people who are living in a protracted state that has not transformed, and how does such an approach you know, forge pathways for people to experience some form of transformative healing to their experience and recognition of their being in a way that that also brings life or brings humanity to who they are as a people that have been silenced and marginalized in the national narrative of Zimbabwe. So what has informed my work is really, you know, appreciating the role that bricolage plays in research, basically being able to look at the different structures within society that shape who we are, the experiences we embody, and also how you know, those experiences vary based on you know, elements such as other elements or structures that shape society, such as the issue of race, the issue of gender, and class, and religion, nationality, you know, political affiliation, and many other categories we can think of and bunch together. And when we're trying to have a holistic picture that appreciates all these cleavages which are shaping people's reality, one then has to be put in a position where they question their positionality in terms of how they're coming into the research space to engage and to make sense of those lived realities that people embody, and what kind of justice can we do in how we then tell those stories that we come across. And I find that you know, the adoption of research creations as an approach really has helped me to combine different ways of thinking, ways of understanding our reality, and even ways of expressing that reality in such a way that whoever then you know, comes across the information that is emerging from the research can relate, you know, in a closest sense to the humanity of those that are represented in the stories that are shared. So for me, what then becomes important is being intentional in how the story is told, and you know, trying to ensure that there is a lot of empathy and humaneness in relating with the lived experiences of people. So we then have to grapple with the questions of then what kind of lens does one adopt to question you know, those lived realities that we see, and what kind of lens does one need to also critically reflect on their contribution to the narrative that they are creating as they are engaging with the different social actors that they're interacting with. And really, that has become a liberating experience for me as a researcher, because I then do not take myself as somebody who knows or who is the best placed person to tell the story, but rather center those who are involved in the study as collaborators who are in a way leading the storytelling and actually shaping what needs to be told, how it needs to be expressed, and making use of creative art. I have then been able to project that story, because really what also becomes important when you're doing research is not only to extract information out of the constituency or community that one is relating with, but also to allow different audiences to relate to that story. And I found that when I was engaging with the group of participants I am collaborating with, they really loved the new approach of using art, because within it they can already see themselves, they can identify with, for example, characters that allow them to express themselves as protagonists who embody a story that needs to be told in a way that best represents them. So I would say, in a way, these are the background elements that have shaped my work. And I have been impressed by, reading scholarship of, writers such as Sylvia Tamal, who really, has been spearheading the work of doing, decolonial African feminism and adopting decolonial methodologies in trying to shape the work that we do and how we write about experiences of marginalized people in our society. So understanding that, this is the framework that has shaped the work that I do, I then have had to grapple with the question, why is it important to tell the story, and whose story is represented in my work, such that even as we now deal with the idea of truth-telling and transformative peace building, how then do we connect these elements to the broader discourse of peace building? I'm just going to play a short video that helps to give context also to why storytelling.
But there are stories that have never been told. The truth has never been told about the history of the liberation struggle vis-a-vis women. It has never been told. And I am hoping one day we will have some people who will be bold enough to stand up and talk about it, or even the writing. But it's a pity that very little is going to come out from the women themselves, because they've been marginalized intentionally to make sure that they are not able, some of them, to speak for themselves. True, women have been abused. Some women ended up with babies, not because they wanted to be babies, to have the babies, but they were raped. So women lived under a terrible environment. We used to have a camp where if you get pregnant, that's where you get dumped. It was called OCBs. And if there are any attacks, one thing you have to have your baby, your gun, to run away. And in terms of feeding, there was no special feed for those kids. Those women suffered. Whenever they got feeds, yes, here and there, but not always. Some people were abused by the chefs themselves. They could have more than 3, 4 girlfriends. When he comes from Maputo, he says, okay, go and find a girl for me from the camp. And, we used to have female camp commanders. They would ring the whistle, call women at a parade, just looking for a girl or a chef to go back to bed.
So you are paraded.
You are paraded. Not because they want all of you, because they know one. And normally those who knew that they can be victims, they used to run away. That's it.
So for me, as I've said, I am situated, as a peace building or as a peace scholar or peace research scholar, who works on Zimbabwe. And, what has inspired the work that I'm currently doing is really, listening to, growing calls by different women actors or women rights groups and broadly the women's movements who have been demanding that there is a story that needs to be told around the experiences of women in Zimbabwe within the post-colonial state and even prior. But most importantly, the post-colonial state, because what has continued to be a big issue is the idea of the unfinished revolution. And what then can we, draw from, those calls of women in trying to make sense of who they are, the struggles that they have fought, and also the change that they are yearning to see in the different constituencies that they are representing as actors or activists. And that for me has become something that is important, especially as a peace scholar, because one of the things that peace scholarship speaks to, where in terms of peace building and also ensuring a position of never returning again to incidents of gross human rights violation or even experiences of marginalization, especially where you even from the story I've played, where you have recognized elements of sexual abuse that women have experienced, but also beyond experiences of sexual abuse, you also have, blatant marginalization and underrepresentation of women's needs and interests. How then do we reconcile this and also, take a new perspective to those experiences and what needs to be done to bring change to the experiences of women, really became the key focus of my project. Firstly, to document, because documentation of those experiences becomes important in generating a narrative that can be followed through to see the trends in which those experiences occur, the effect of those experiences, and the pockets that have been there to bring relief or that could be harnessed to transform their predicaments. So I then, have adopted research creations, as I said, as a lens in which I bring data from different sources. That includes having one-on-one interviews with, different women actors who are within the broader umbrella of women movements in Zimbabwe, going through, archival recordings of speeches, of interviews that they have done, and also scanning through different texts and images that have been in the public domain, representing the struggles and experiences of women in Zimbabwe. And with that, I then have then been working with the group of women that I have been collaborating with to make sense of who they are as a constituency, the processes they have gone through, and the future that they want to build. And engaging with the women that I've been working with, they have come to me to say, this has been a healing space for us. And, from a critical feminist lens, it is important for research that we do to have a purpose. And whilst we may not define the purpose in terms of, of course, research purpose, it could be, looked at from an academic sense, but then purpose for me here, I'm looking at the purpose for the community to which I'm working with. Having purpose in my research, especially now where I've been able to get appreciation from the participants of how talking and documenting their experiences and shaping, a new narrative of who they are as a people has brought them a sense of recognition, a feeling of being healed, and also acknowledged to the extent that they feel that even if they pass on, their stories will not be forgotten. They are now kept in a way that allows future generations to connect and also even build on from the efforts that they have played in making life better for women in Zimbabwe. So here is really a map of Zimbabwe, which is located in the southern region in Africa. And it is a it is a former British colony, and has since the end of colonial rule in 1980 experienced various forms of transformation and civil wars, especially in the early 1980s. There was a genocide that affected distinct ethnic groupings in Zimbabwe within the Matabeleland and Midlands regions. And in the post-2000 era, we also witnessed heightened electoral violence associated with, the clamping down of political opponents who are challenging the existing ruling government. And we've also seen post the 2017 era, where the state has now even further transitioned to a militarized or securitized organization, militarized state, where the voices of women are further clamped down, but also even the broader general populace is living under a lot of strife. I'm happy to talk through more about the context of Zimbabwe to anybody who might be interested to get deeper insights in there. But what really becomes important for me is to just share with you then, what are some of the things that are emerging from my work, which then makes me to say research creations really offer a way to share an alternative view on the lived realities of women. So from the engagements that I've had, I interacted with 14 women activists in Zimbabwe who represent different constituencies of women's groupings. And these women were purposively selected partly because, of their heavy involvement in advocating for women's rights. And I guess this is where some of my bias already comes in with the work that I'm doing, or the work that I've done so far. But I think, to try and navigate women's experiences in Zimbabwe, it's difficult to look at the totality. One sort of like has to find an angle to get in. And for me, it was useful to just target a particular group of women who have been, widely involved in different activities championing women's interest in Zimbabwe. And with that, I was able to look through engage with them about their life stories, the journey they've walked, and as individuals within the movements that they are a part of, and their aspirations, for the Zimbabwean that they want to see. And with those life stories of theirs, I was able to then have a sense of mapping women's movements in Zimbabwe, the rise, the evolution, and the state in which they stand currently. I would say, even drawing from literature, there is general consensus that prior to the end of colonial rule in 1980, there isn't much writing that concretely gives voice to organizings that women's groups have been doing in Zimbabwe. This is not to say there isn't much of that work, but rather there is an overbearing focus on the liberation movement vis-a-vis the dominance of male liberation, male nationalists within the liberation movement and the work that they do. As such, women's presentation within that sense is seen as if they are, supporters of a bigger cause, which is not their own cause. And yet, from the conversations I I had with the research participants, you could tell that they have always been active players in the political process within their society, even though their contributions are silent. So when we look now in terms of mapping, literature shows us that in elementary phase, where we begin to see visible representation of women's groupings as actors within political processes in Zimbabwe, is really at the end of the 1970s. That's really moving towards the dawn of independence in Zimbabwe up to the mid-1980s. And here the narrative really, as I've just shared, was dominated by liberation movements, and focus really was on welfare-oriented organizations. So there was much talk about development, and really you don't hear discourses around gendered interests of various groups, particularly women as a constituency. So there is absence of a gendered analysis of the roles that women have played apart from the domineering narratives of the liberation movements. And in those stories that are told, what we tend to see is the perception that there has been limited or tension between women's groupings and the state, more like they had quite a working relationship that has enabled the state to mobilize women through organized activities, more like women had not been contesting certain things about the state, which from the experiences of participants is not entirely true. And we notice that post this phase, there is what I would deem is called the slow awakening phase between 1987, late 1980s to mid 1990s, where we begin to see more visibility of women's groupings, but they are presented as non-combative actors who are relying on depoliticized messagings to challenge the status quo and make demands for women's groupings who, as we observe, later in the work that I'm going to present, really part of the contention in the narrative that exists about Zimbabwe and women in Zimbabwe is that the state has largely been an oppressive system that uses, gender to an extent to even discriminate against various group of women based also further on their social status, their political affiliation, to the extent that, women, are continuously having to fight and demand, for their position to be ascertained within this setting. So what we then see as part of the contributing factors is really their ability to speak up against oppression. And, within the late 1980s, it's really to an extent considered part of the slow awakening phase, as women were pushing back on social norms that were marginalizing sex workers, single mothers, and unmarried women. Now, we also see a period which, coincides with the proliferation of human rights discourse and championing of human rights interests within the early 1990s to mid 2000s. And, with that, more women's groupings emerging to focus on specific issues of interest to their constituencies and ensuring they protect, those interests. For example, we have what is called Musasa Project, which advocates for largely girl child interests, but also, advocates against gender-based violence. And with that, there's dominantly a human rights framework that informs the work that women's groupings were championing. And, this also connects with how women's groups had been able to participate in women-led global women initiatives, such as the Nairobi and Beijing Women's Conference. And then with that, they then heightened their voice and their position, demanding for their interests. Now, with the human rights framework as part of the dominant lens in which women's interests are championed, it then created new avenues for tension between the state and women rights actors or women's groupings, because from the early 2000s rather, there was the emergence of new political organizations, which is the Movement for Democratic Change and Opposition Political Party, which was challenging the democratic posture of the state and demanding for more openings of the political space, equal participation and access to resources and the political stage. And with that, it then became a tag of war between political actors, the different political actors, but also the government, clamping down on women's movements, which earlier on had not necessarily been a key focus of the government or trying to control their work, because they seemed not to be interfering in matters that are of a threat to the government. So what we see emerging within the late 2000 to around 2013 is a state brutality on women activists who are targeted for their supposed participation in the regime change agenda. And we see more women being arrested. We see more women being abducted. And part of the participants I interacted with were able to share such experiences of having been abducted or arrested because of their involvement in women rights activities. And what that shows us is that whilst all these political processes are happening, women are also playing as a stage in which contestations are occurring, and their marginalization becomes heightened because they're already an unrecognized constituency within the state, in the sense that political actors within Zimbabwe have been using different social norms to discriminate against women. So for those women who then are taking central stage in challenging issues that affect them directly, making use of different frameworks such as a human rights framework, and to an extent a gendered lens, in terms of demanding their interests, they then become people at loggerheads with the state. Now, how do we heal from those experiences, and how do we represent those experiences became something of importance in my work. And I just want to mention also that in terms of mapping the women's movement, what also came out is the idea of a stagnation phase, which is really post 2013. And one of the critical questions that I asked was to say, what do you say are the challenges within women's movements, and how do you understand the women's movement or women organizing as a constituency in Zimbabwe? And a key response I got from one of the participants is the use of the Shona proverb, Mushamukadzi, which and this can be interpreted or translated in different ways, but within the way it was operationalized, they were conveying the idea that women make the home, and in addressing this question, they were actually challenging what home is there to talk about when the women's movement is fractured by the system. And they gave illustration of this image. They showed me a home which was close by, which I took a photo of, and that's this illustration of this image, which captures the idea of a fractured home of a dilapidated home as the fractured system. And as such, she equated the state of women movements to the figure of a deserted home, as shown in the image I've just shared. And this deserted home symbolizes a space that is unlivable because it fails to offer the amenities that give comfort, a sense of belonging, and well-being to its inhabitants. So these insights portray the growing tensions within the movements, fueled by differences in personal ambition and collective goals pursued by different actors within the collective. And what then do we make of that experience? I then had to answer some ethical dilemmas as a researcher in terms of what becomes my motive and how do I interpret this context? What embodied political biases do I have, and how do I address them? And how do I reconcile the complex temporality in which women's experiences are shared as they are moving between the different phases of the movement that I've just shared, some of it dating back to the pre-independence eras. And now, how do I best represent the characters and connect with each one of them authentically and ensure that, I do not only give audience to their experiences, but also the audience that engages with this work can also respect those experiences as true and important. So, having looked at these dilemmas and understood the role that I have to play and I could play in representing women's interests, I joined hands with a cartoonist, my colleague Jimmy Spire, who is based in Uganda, and we worked through different data sets that I engaged with, and I was able to draw out key themes that translate the stories that were shared by women within the group. And from those stories, one of the theme that comes through is the idea of mothers of the struggle. And in your view, is that cartoon that captures this story around mothers of the struggle and within this depiction of mothers of the struggle, what we can see is how women have been key players or key actors and continue to be key actors in different political processes and social processes happening in Zimbabwe. And they act as even at a community levels as aunts, as sisters, as mothers, as grandmothers, and great grandmothers. They also translate those relationships they have with one another in that way to the social setting where they have to fight a political system that does not recognize them. And what we can observe is that women have been carrying the society and are continuing to carry the society, but there is still yet to be a recognition of their contributions and their efforts. Hence, through this illustration, we can see how they are abused and used to for particular, political or even individual gains of those within the system that dominate or exert their dominance on the marginalized. And what that leaves for the women is a state of sorrow, in some instances, a sense of despair, disappointment, but also there's the realization that
This is for
they,
the crank.
they can
Okay.
they can
Yeah. Okay.
they can do more to change the status quo. So this is seen now in this second illustration that
This is also rental.
this is illustrated in this second illustration that has emerged from the study of
Are you even gonna notice? You're not gonna notice, yeah. Yeah, I think I'd probably do, yeah, I think I'm not gonna do.
Of activism. And so this is with this illustration, the big narrative that comes through is the idea of activism and renewed camaraderie, that despite the presence of a heavy-handed state system, social system that seeks to marginalize the constituency of women. And here, women are not treated as a homogeneous group, but rather, as actors with multiple identities, that create varied experiences from them. So despite that, the presence of a state that creates those experiences for them, they are still able to rise and protest or demand for their interests and needs. And in doing so, they're creating the society that they want, and they will continue to create the society that they want. Hence, the continued messaging around "you will not silence us." So though they are interested in silencing women, what is emerging from the interactions I've had with various women in the study is the understanding that even though they are existing in a state of stagnation, they will continue to fight. And that understanding gives them a sense of peace in knowing that the struggle is not one that you fight and expect that it would end today or tomorrow, but it is a continuous struggle because their needs and interests are ever changing. And the state is also consistently looking for manipulative ways to reduce their freedoms. So they have to continue to rise to the challenge. And through their collaborated efforts and network, they help each other and support each other to defend their interests. And with that, that constitutes transformative peace building elements within their organizing. I thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Ruth, for the wonderful presentation and really storytelling exercise by the scholar here, not the activist. I'm sure we are also an activist in a way. So what I pick as a form of summary, I'm not a discussant, is the lack of transformation of the state in relation to the women. I mean, I find that very fundamental, that despite the fact that the women folk in Zimbabwe contributed so much to the liberation, the state has not been transformed enough to give them a seat at the table. And your picture says it all. The picture says it all. Those images, they are very representative of what is actually happening. The silencing, the exclusion, and the subjugation. But again, we also see resilience and the agency that say, no, you are not going to silence us. We own this space together. We are going to, continue to struggle. But we really expect that the state should be more accommodative and actually representative, given the fact that the struggle with, were carried out, with our involvement, even serving as combatant and all of that. So thank you so much for giving us so much to chew. The floor is open now for people to respond, to ask questions, to provide further insight to what Dr. Ruth has presented. Thank you very much. So please, if you have some thought to share or question to ask, can you please use the reaction button to express your interest. Dr. Ruth, can you please stop sharing? All right, thank you. Okay. Comments, interventions, questions.
I see there's a question and input from Shireen in the chat box. Maybe I could respond to that.
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm just seeing that. Yes, please go ahead.
So the question reads, I wonder if I could attend to, my language is disappearing. I wonder if you could talk about what happened to early attempts to tell the stories of women in the liberation movement, such as Flame. To what extent have scholars in the diaspora begun to open the space for discussion about contentious issues? I think one of the things that really comes to my mind when I'm looking at other efforts, that precede even the work that I have, that I am doing, is the understanding that, I mean, the scale at which we can, document experiences of women movements in Zimbabwe is to an extent limited because of resources to be able to reach out to a broad group of women and document, and secondly the controlled nature in which the state operates, which makes it quite difficult to access different women that might be useful in sharing their stories and their experiences. Now, with that, what you then observe is that different researchers like myself tend to, go in and look at, small pockets of women actors that they have access to, and probably to an extent we extend on a narrative that is there. In some instances, we bring new ways of looking at it, like in this case where I'm tapping into research creations as a way of projecting those stories. And with that, those efforts, I think, are really, welcomed in trying to ensure that, the documentation continues, as we can never fully grasp it with one or two people working on it. Now, in relation to the specific film that you cite, the one Flame, I think if I recall, much of what tends to happen is at the time something comes out, there is a hype and there is an interest in following it through, but as time moves on, it dies down because there isn't maybe a lot more people engaging about that subject matter, or it tends to be cliques of people who have access to that information who are actually engaging about that subject matter. And we look back into Zimbabwe where, even the state controls the kind of media that circulates and who has access to that media. It becomes a matter of how some of the stories we can tell about Zimbabwean women are actually in some ways projected outside of Zimbabwe. as opposed to being, projected within the country and being used to spark other engagements within the country. And I want to believe we have the opportunity to change this trajectory in which narratives are presented and engaged about, or even silenced over time. And I don't know whether it is just us in the diaspora who should be driving it or can drive it, or rather, in a way, collaborating. I think the better way is to, build those collaborations and bring on board more women who are owners of these stories to tell their stories, to share their stories, to present their stories. And one of the things I'm hoping to do with this project really is to invite some of the participants when I do the final exhibition to really share their stories both at home and even here in Canada as part of keeping the story alive, and also using a digital repository to allow for access to these stories, trans borders, so that it is not a bordered narratives that is limited to a group of people. So I think that's some of my thoughts on that input.
Yeah, thank you very much. I can see that Prof has given you, heads up that, thumb up that you satisfactorily answer her question. Do we have more interventions? Yeah, Sister Silva Bauer.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Ruth, for that really engaging presentation and discussion. I'm particularly drawn to your method of, using visuals and doing a different kind of, storytelling, even within academia. Because one of the things that I'm finding in the work that we do, and I'm really glad that in your work in Zimbabwe, you focus on, these stories that are not forgotten, but that are intentionally suppressed, that, we don't want to hear. That in doing that, you are presenting them or hoping to finally present them in a platform that appeals to an audience beyond academia, and also in a way that, for me, I think makes it a lot easier for people to remember. Just like, the host was saying when Samuel was summarizing at the end of your presentation, that some of the images, you may forget, some of the arguments you make, but the images kind of remind you, they speak to you. In the use of Proverbs, when I saw that last image with the house that was torn apart, that says a lot. All of that said, I, now want to get into, as you indicated earlier, that you're also dealing with a constituency that is not homogeneous in interest, right? And then you layer that on top of the fact that you are in a country where people are at the moment just desperate for things to get going. And I think that story is very similar across the continent in terms of, things are bad, we want things to keep going. Why do you want us to be reminded of the kinds of things in some cases where people would rather move forward? So that's, so a comment on that. The other one that I'm curious about is what kind of documentation exists in the Zimbabwean archives or in the law, in whether there's been any cases taken to court, or just in documentation of these kinds of harms and things in the liberation movement in any form, whether they are in the archives, whether anyone has documented them, but in an official capacity. Forget the academics and artists, who are doing that, but whether there's anything that is documented in the national memory keeping thing. The other one that I want to ask, and forgive me that the questions seem to be, but pick and choose, is whether there are particular icons of the women's liberation at the time that then become representative, as it were, of the story. So then the story ends up centering around them, similar in the South African case, you are talking about women in the liberation movement, you immediately go to Winnie Mandela and a handful of others. Whether or not that is the case, because we do find, I mean, there are so many similarities with the Ghana case, but in the post-colonial national reconstruction stories, these stories are very similar. So thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. So these are really interesting inputs, and I'll try to address them as best as I can. Please feel free to nudge if there's anything I need to revisit. I think, yes, definitely. I'm operating in a difficult time where, there isn't much interest to look back. And if we look within the Zimbabwean context, at a national level, there is, a push towards amnesia, right? What we don't talk about, doesn't exist and shouldn't exist. And as such, we don't need to bring it to life. And when we talk about it, it means, we're giving impetus to its, existence. That's validating the narratives that are put across. So what you do observe is that kind of silencing, and to an extent, even an effort from the government to co-opt some women activists or women actors within the movement. Hence, there's now this, new avenues of tensions that are existing within the movements, where, some are now being co-opted and, now creating new narratives that sort of like dampens the realities that are shared by others. So, for example, it should be 2 years back during the COVID era, when some of women political leaders were abducted from their home. They had protested, because of the conditions that had been put by the government, under COVID restrictions, which were not favorable to women, especially marginalized women who are market women and stuff. Now they are starving, and they were trying to challenge the government that whilst we understand the need for COVID restrictions, I think there should be a better way of implementing some of those changes. So they went into the street. It was a really small protest, almost like a group of 3-4 women that were protesting, and the state came heavily on them. Some were, amongst them were abused, when they were abducted and put into detention, and there's never been really any real charges, leveled against them, except trumped up, allegations. And now, within those experiences, you start to hear others raising doubt that, they were abducted and they were abused or violated, during their absentia, and in raising that doubt, then it then forces them to be silenced. And I think this is where part of the trickiness is playing out within the state, and putting a lot of challenges to access women, to document women's experiences, and to even validate women's experiences because of those tensions that are there. Because even some of the doubts are raised by other prominent women within the ruling party, for example, that then uses defamatory allegations against their disappearance, and making it seem they had gone gallivanting, and other things, and trying to destroy the state. So what we see now is a push towards rebranding the state, because we are now in a post-Mugabe era, and that drive to rebrand the state is happening at every cost of silencing any narrative that seems to suggest the state has actually gotten worse. In fact, any elements of violations of women's rights, interests, and so forth are actually associated to an extent with the Mugabe era, and making it seem that we have changed. So why then do we need to be opening up spaces to debate about these matters, or even address those matters, when this regime that is there is not like that? And yet we know there's continuity in actually the existence of the actors that were part of perpetrators of those acts of violence on women, in the early, in the previous era under the Mugabe regime. And even some of them, were dating back to the liberation struggle as narrated in the earlier clip that I shared. So what I can say then is, in response to your second question of, any documentation that exists at a formal level, and I guess this could be almost tied down to any efforts by the state as the bearer or of the responsibility to document that truth and ensure that at a time where maybe redress is needed, because as part of as part of peace building, you need that documentation to be there and can be used as evidence. Unfortunately, such efforts do not exist. I'm not really aware of the existence of those efforts, and this is nothing new, especially if we look at how, with the incident of the Gukurahundi genocide, the state did its own investigation through two different commissions that they set up, but the findings of those commissions were never made public, nor do people have access to those findings. And unlike here in Canada, where because of the Proper Act, where you can actually demand the state to release that any information that they have in that regards, there isn't an avenue to make such demands within the context of Zimbabwe. So the documentation that is happening is really within the confines of civil society groupings, and also amongst communities and families where, maybe as a mother, I would tell my children the story of what occurred. And but depending on the nature of the experiences that are there, some of them may be too sensitive to open up to your family, and maybe better off to open up to a stranger, like a researcher myself, or a civil society actor. And with that, some of the stories are difficult then to be shared much more publicly because of the sensitivities that are there. And I think in trying to do this research, whilst cartoons, carry the story, they in themselves do not directly disclose the individual who shared that story. So there's that element of anonymity around who exactly is the storyteller. But of course, there can be other challenges, I think, relating now to your third question on are there any particular icons that become representatives of the story, right? So whose story is being told? Is it a story that includes an ordinary woman in some, small community there in Zimbabwe, or it is, some of those, bigger public figures that are already there? With this, I think for me, I tried my level best to create a balance around the collective of women that I drew into the study, partly because in my previous involvement with the civil society groupings in Zimbabwe, when I worked for the Center for Sexualities, AIDS and Gender in South Africa, I interacted with various groups of women whom we were training on different, gender and development matters. And that allowed me to build some sort of a network. And in that, I did what, as I said, biasly thought is my best to draw in, women of different status, even, and women with different levels of influence or leadership positions within the collective movement. And what particular, story then is being portrayed? I tried to not necessarily center around individual stories, and as much as I draw in life stories of individual participants, I tried to develop thematic conversations that they are speaking to, and through that have then now created these illustrations that speak broadly to those particular themes. And once I finish and do the exhibition in almost 2 months' time, it's just, sorry, today I could only show 2 illustrations because I have not shown the bigger group all the illustrations. I'm doing a workshop with them next week. So once I've shown them the whole collection, you all see, in the full collection of the story, how, the narratives are actually, quite broader than, stories that speak about experiences of, maybe big icons or, those who have more influence. I hope I have answered you.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel Aldeniyi, I would like to make some comments.
Well, good evening. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, good evening. And thank you, Dr. Ruth, for your beautiful presentation. Well, I'm fascinated by your thoughts on the importance of storytelling in relaying human experiences. And I think there is a kind of intersection between your work and what I'm doing here at Leuphana University in Germany. I'm currently working on rape and violence against women in Nigeria, and the possibility of using literary narratives, to address the social problem. And looking at your presentation this evening, I'd like to know if you think storytelling can be truly adopted as an alternative to legal approach, or possibly to complement the war against rape and violence, violence against women, not only in Nigeria, but also in other parts of Africa. Thank you. That's my question.
Sorry, Emmanuel, I did not get the last part. I did get the element where you're asking whether storytelling can be adopted as, maybe if you
can it be adopted as an alternative approach, to eradicating rape and violence against women in Africa?
Right. Do I take this one or can I take 2?
Yes, please. Yes, Koto Williams. We still have a few minutes. Yes, please. Koto Williams, please go ahead, and then the speaker can respond.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Ruth, for your presentation. It has been really significant in terms of some of the things that I'm thinking about doing in Liberia. I am a Liberian woman based in Nairobi, working in Juba, and in a way that triangulation of, different triggers related to the war, opportunities for transitional justice, I think is rooted in what you have talked about today from the place of storytelling. And I believe that is really important because if you look at the accountability of the states across the African continent and outside of the African continent, it seems like it has become very difficult to engage transitional justice in the way that we knew it in the past. So I would say in the last decade, but it has also become really difficult when who we call the perpetrators of atrocities in the different wars are now our leaders. So I've thought about storytelling from the perspective of the people who feel like they have been victimized. That is an action that they can take to ensure that there's memory and memorialization. I really wanted to find out from you. I like the way you continuously mention bias, because there's no way that you get into storytelling or you get into research without having some sort of, subjective position. So I really wanted to find out from you in identifying the women that you work with in Zimbabwe. And by the way, Zimbabwe is like a second home to me. In the way that you identify women, like what steps did you take to ensure that you were being inclusive, even for those that you don't, you don't like their position. You talk about positionality, that you don't like their position, or you feel like this is outside of my own, outside of your position. How did you ensure that you were able to include them in the storytelling so that it becomes more comprehensive and, yeah. I just wanted to find out from you, how did you make an effort to do that, to be more inclusive?
Okay. Thank you so much, Koto. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. What I missed to also say is that I managed to get access to a book that was written by a prolific human rights activist. I don't know if it's visible. Can you see it? By a prolific human rights activist in Zimbabwe, Justina Mukoko. It's the story of her abduction and trial in 2008. And what was fascinating when I was reading this book is how she recognized the role played by different women from different political lines in calling out for her return. And that for me made me realize that as a movement, women have certain common issues that they want to fight for, or they converge to fight for, to defend. But also, secondly, within the context of Zimbabwe, there are other networks or there are other avenues that bring women together. The issue of family ties or clan ties. And if we then can connect with those clan ties and family ties, we then able to understand that despite existence of some differences that might be there in terms of their political affiliation, or things that they advocate for, or how they conduct themselves, when it is necessary, women are able to converge and call out for certain demands. And it was also great for me that in reading this book, I was able to see the different women in Zimbabwe who participated in the fight to bring back Justina Mukoko when she was abducted. So they became key people for me to engage with. But also then, secondly, as I mentioned when I was responding to Sylvia, that my participation in the women's movement through the organization Center for Sexualities, AIDS, and Gender Studies enabled me to also see women who are coming from the smaller groupings of their organizing, and that made it easier to see the issues that they push for. And I managed to then invite those who were available to participate in the study, because I also had to consider the time factor, how much time I could be in the field to engage. And I also had to consider that I'm operating in a very securitized society. My security or my safety is as important as the safety of the participants that I would be bringing in to the study, or that I'll be interacting with. So I then also had to work with interlocutors to, identify also other women that could be brought in. So it's almost like snowballing in some ways, where, they would say, maybe this other person could be of interest for you to talk to. And depending on their availability, I was then able to engage with. And I did not necessarily go with a number in terms of a target number in mind, but I was more drawn to the time that was available to me, and my ability to access, certain groups of women at that point. And combining all these vignettes, I then was able to come up with the 14 participants. I hope, in a way, I answer you in how I shaped the sample pool or sample size that I ended up working with. Emmanuel, and then how did I ensure that I'm inclusive? So for me, things like intergenerational dialogue was important. So I'm not only talking to the older women, but then I was speaking to the younger women. I also had to look at the constituencies that they represent. So women within the arts space, women within the media space, women within the legal space, women within the health space, women within the political space, and also women who have experience of the liberation struggle, where some of the vignettes I sort of like was ticking off as I was getting respondents or confirmations of participants that I worked with. And with that, I think for me it was also important to just understand that women, as the women I'm dealing with, also embody multiple identities, and how do those multiple identities influence the work they do and the experience they have had within the movement, became interesting vignettes for my work. The question you posed, Emmanuel, is an important one to consider, especially because the beauty about us as African people, and here I'm declaring also my bias, and as an African woman, is that as far as I can remember, we have been able to keep our histories intact and to move them across generations through storytelling. It's almost a natural avenue or approach we have of keeping our humanity alive. So what more too can we adopt in addressing issues such as rape and violence against women, by being able to tell some of these stories in the sense that they tend to be silenced experiences, and there's a lot of shunning around it, a lot of stigma also around those who maybe even try to speak up. Now, what we then have to be thinking about is, what is our motive, and what do we want to see once the story has been told. Because telling a story for the sake of telling a story might actually be more harmful than it is to those whose stories have to be told. So now thinking about how that story is going to be told, who is going to tell that story, the timing around when that story is shared, and you know, its effect or impact in our society becomes all intended efforts we have to think about and collaborate on, such that, you know, we can use storytelling as a transformative tool to challenge hegemonic, you know, perspectives on society around how they view women as objects, or how they view women as subjects for their own pleasure, for oppression, but also to see their humanity, and also beyond looking at the experiences of violation, sexual violation, we need to be intentionally you know, showcasing their humanity, such that we shun away from derogatory terms which may be unintentional, we are putting across, like saying this is a rape person. I mean, it's not a rape victim, right? It's a person. It's Ruth if it's Ruth. It's Koto if it's Koto. It's Emmanuel if it's Emmanuel. And being able to identify the personhood of those people as part of our, you know, storytelling process makes it then meaningful to use that tool to transform those oppressive practices that are there, and building inclusive societies.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think we had a great day listening to you today. Profound, deep, and very experiential, I would say. Thank you so much. We are giving you a round of applause now. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Directorate, Professor Nduka Otiono, Director of African Studies, and other faculties and staff, we thank you so much for coming. The Brown Bag series will resume in winter 2025, but we have the Knowing Africa series, I think, from the fall, coordinated by Professor Shirin. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to further engagement with you. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.